Welcome back. You're listening to Houston Real Estate Radio. I'm your host, Shanna Register, and every week we bring you news and information you can use on your next real estate transaction. This is going to be some great information today that I know if you purchase a property, you're going to want this information, and if you're selling, it's a great place to start as well, especially if it's a unique property and you want to find out what you can sell it for. This is going to be a great show for you. So I've got Carl Hall with me on the show today. He's a realtor over at Register Real Estate Advisors, and he's brought in a great guest for us. So if you've got a real estate question, though, during the program or anytime, you can always call us at 844-788-9444 to answer your real estate questions. 844-788-9444, and we'll answer your real estate questions. So, Carl, tell us about your guest you brought in today.
Well, I brought in an old friend who's also an expert appraiser. He's currently the chief appraiser for Prosperity Bank USA. Real estate experience includes staff appraiser and AVP for Brenham National Bank. In 83 to 85, he goes back a ways in this business. And he's also lectured at the finance department in A&M and is currently a nationally renowned instructor of the Appraisal Institute and an AQB certified USPAP instructor. And if we have time, he's going to tell us what those letters mean. He's a member of the Houston chapter of the Appraisal Institute, currently serving as vice president for the chapter, and will ascend to the presidency in 2017. He'll also be a member of the National Board of Directors for the Appraisal Institute in 2017. His practice includes a history of appraisal, all types of real estate, appraisal review, business appraisal, litigation support, and real estate instruction. And he wasn't expecting me to say this, but he also plays a guitar pretty good.
He just does it all. Well, appraisal is such a huge factor in a real estate transaction when there's a lender involved. So, Rob, you work with Prosperity
Bank, right.
But no matter who you go through for a loan, you're going to have to get an appraisal to get the lender to approve giving you the money.
That's right.
So that's kind of why the appraisal process is in place. You don't have to get an appraisal on a property if you're purchasing without a lender, but sometimes people choose to. And if they choose to, then they can pick whichever appraiser they want to go out and appraise their property, right?
That's right. They can. They have to realize, though, that any appraiser they engage, the appraisal can't be used by the institution. There's federal regulation against that.
Okay.
It would have to be engaged by the institution for them to be able to use it.
Okay. So a seller who gets an appraisal and then puts a property on the market based on that appraisal,
right.
And they get a buyer, and the buyer's using a lending institution, to get a loan, then they're going to have to get their own appraisal.
Right.
It's going to have to be reappraised.
They can do that. I mean, the lender. It's up to the lender. They may want to go back to the same appraiser. It's at their discretion.
Okay.
On that.
Okay, so you've got an exciting 2017 ahead.
Yes, I do.
President of the Appraisal Institute. Woo! So that's a lot you have going on. Let's talk about a little bit about that. What is the Appraisal Institute?
Well, it's an international organization that right now we have about 20,000 members with designations, and there are 4 designations: the MAI, which is a commercial designation; the SRA, which is residential. Then we have the 2 review designations, which are relatively new. The AIGRS is a commercial review designation, and the AIRRS is residential. And it takes it to become an appraiser. There are 3 types. You have general certification, which lets you appraise all kind of properties. Then you have a residential certification that limits you to 1 to 4 family residential. Mm-hmm. And then you have residential license, which limits you even more. Mm-hmm. And what the Institute does is it takes education and experience beyond the general certification level, and it's like, all the designations you have, Shannon, there's lots of initials behind your name. Because
what do they mean? Who knows? You've sat in a lot of classrooms.
Right. But you've also gotten an awful lot of information about specialized property types and specialized financing situations that someone who hadn't had those doesn't. And that's what the Institute does. They call it the designated difference is what they call it.
So, okay, but if I go out and purchase a property and I'm using a lender, I don't get to choose who the appraiser is.
No, you don't.
So, I can't tell you how many closings I've been to where I don't even know who the appraiser was. I just know we got an appraisal, it was good, and we closed. So, how often do these designations come into play? Because one, the consumer doesn't get to choose who their appraiser is, and two, they don't even usually know who the appraiser is. Really, the only contact most realtors even have with the appraiser is just, hey, they get the phone call, is there an alarm on the house? When can I go appraise it? And do I need a super key? That's really the only contact we have.
Well, that's where the lender comes in. We have a panel of approved appraisers at Prosperity Bank that when we send out a bid, it goes to the way we use it with residential, it's a lot more random than it is for commercial properties because of the type of software we use. But
and I think there's a lot more residential appraisers.
Oh,
right?
yeah. The volume's about 4 to 1.
It's a huge pool of them.
Yeah. So on our panel, we try to make sure that we have qualified people, and part of that qualification is if they have a designation or not. I mean, we don't discriminate against them if they don't. That's illegal, and we don't do it because we don't want to break the law. We want to be ethical.
Yeah.
When it comes down to,
but you can choose to have on your panel more educated appraisers versus ones that don't have those designations.
Oh, yeah.
So I think a key point of this for consumers is use a quality lender who's going to use quality appraisers, because if you go online and go through a company, you don't know who you're using, you don't know who you're getting, they may not be using quality appraisers, and if your appraisal comes up short, it could be because they don't have a quality appraiser on staff.
That's exactly right.
Or in their pool of appraisers.
On their panel, right.
Yeah.
There aren't that many staff appraisers anymore. There are staff reviewers, but most appraisers are independent.
So when you are interviewing your lender as a consumer, when you're interviewing your lender, what's the question you need to ask to find out if they've got good appraisers?
You would just ask them if they have an appraisal department that has their own panel, or are they using a third party?
Okay. And most of them use a third party?
No, not really. Well,
a lot of the mortgage bankers.
A lot of the mortgage bankers do.
Not necessarily banks.
Right. Most banks have their own appraisal department.
So the difference between having an appraisal department and using a mortgage banker who doesn't have an appraisal department, what's the biggest difference?
Number one, your lender, your mortgage broker is not going to be as committed to the loan as your lender. Mm-hmm. Number one. Number two, they have more contact. Like I know our lenders, and they know they can contact me or contact somebody else in the department if there's a problem. And a lot of time, the mortgage broker has no idea who he's talking to or where the appraisal came from or who ordered it.
Let's talk about that not being committed to the loan, because Carl, you and I know that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Because what that means to the consumer who's listening, what I want them to take away from this and understand from that is, if you are working with a lender who doesn't have an in-house appraisal department and have a review process for if that appraisal doesn't come in good, if it doesn't make value.
Right. Well, making value doesn't mean make it a bad appraisal on the back side.
But if it doesn't make value, you may have an issue.
You have
and if
some
you
recourse,
have an issue, if they don't have an appraisal department, you have nowhere to go. They just can't do the loan.
Right.
So at least if there's a bank and there's an appraisal review process, you can at least go through that process.
Right, and most banks that have an appraisal department do have a dispute process.
Well, let's, Carl, I know you had a couple questions.
I just wanted to do two things to kind of grease the skids between our two professions, and is if you've seen something that we can do for the appraisers, or if there's some things that you would recommend as president this year that the appraisers can do to improve our process. That's a 2-in-1.
Right. Oh, there's a lot of things.
Suggestions.
You bet. The first thing is information. With residential, it moves fast, so there isn't as much time to get information as there is with commercial. But definitely, square footage, the buyer and seller, the contract, that has to be given. That's got to be right there. The contact person, the email and phone number.
Go ahead.
And
Go ahead.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. The contact information with both email and phone number. We're required by USPAP, which is Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, to get a copy of the contract or make every effort to.
Right. And usually the lender gives that to the appraisal to the appraiser when they order the appraisal.
Right.
If we know of a pothole that might affect you, would that be stepping out of bounds to warn, to give you some heads up on something
No.
that is unusual?
That would be really helpful. It's funny because brokers look at a house on the residential side and they get excited about different aspects of the house because there's more money in your pocket if it's a really cool attribute to the house. Appraisers see houses as just something I have to deal with. Case in point, when I was still doing fee work, I had a broker say, "You're going to love this house." I went, "Oh yeah, why?" And she said, "Well, it's 6,000 square feet, 3 stories on a half acre." And I said, "You don't understand. I like 1,700 square foot rectangles with minimum landscaping." So there's a little disconnect from the get-go. So really, just all the information that you have on the sale and on the property itself, what school district it's in. Now, the appraiser is supposed to go back and check all that, but if they have the information up front, it's a whole lot easier to confirm than it is to
It's a shorter
find.
distance between begin and finish.
Right.
And that can help.
Okay, we're
Yes.
going to go to a quick break. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors, and we'll have a couple of more questions for Rob Moorman. So we'll come right back after a word from our sponsors here on Houston Real Estate Radio. And if you've got a real estate question, give us a call, 844-788-9444. We'll be right back.